Oh hey guys, what game you playing? Oh, FE4? That game sucks. It's full of cryptic crap. Like, oh man, I sure do hope I put Lex at this one specific tile, otherwise he gets dicked out of his best weapon. Haha! I only play games that don't have that kind of cryptic crap in them. Like FE7. Oh boy, it's my favorite time! The time where I discuss a character who does questionable things that hurt his loved ones, but for understandable yet not excusable reasons. This episode, we're looking at doing shitty things due to survivor's guilt, not seen on the show since way back in episode 3 with Gilbert. And we're looking at survivor's guilt through the lens of Harken, FE7's pre-promote hero who, and I'm just gonna get the obvious joke out of the way, he is literally Game Boy Advance Astrom. Just look at their designs, Harken is just obviously a Strom in the GBA engine. Okay, I brought it up once, now I never have to bring it up again. So, let's get on with the show! Harken is recruited on chapter 25, a chapter that has two different versions depending on whether or not you've leveled up your physical units or leveled up your magical units more. Oh wait, did I say physical units? I meant specifically Guy, Dorcas, Bartray, and Raven. Flyers, archers, lords, armors, dart, and geeks don't count. Oh, and did I say magic? I meant specifically Lucius, Sarah, Priscilla, and Urk. Canis and Pent apparently don't count as people, according to FE7 route splits. Oh, and did I say that you recruited Harken on chapter 25? I meant to say that you only recruit him if you defeated less than 2 promoted enemies before turn 10 on the physical version of the map, but only certain pre-promoted enemies. Some pre-promoted enemies you can kill and they won't count. Oh, and on the magical version, he'll only show up if you open less than 4 doors on the map before turn 10. What the fuck is wrong with FE7? Once Harken shows up, he's an enemy unit working with the Black Fang, and he can be recruited by all the Pharaians, since, you know, they can recognize him. He can also be recruited by Hector and Oswin, who also recognize him, so I guess Harken is just kind of a famous knight, and with those base stats, I can understand why. His recruitment conversation, regardless of who it's with, reveals his backstory. He was the lone survivor of Elbert's Knights, who all got their life force sucked away by the Resident Evil wizard douchebag Nurgle. Harken learned that Nurgle had connections to the assassin group, the Black Fang, and he snuck into their ranks, intending to throw his life away to get revenge on Nurgle. Once he reveals this, regardless of who he's talking to, the conversation generally goes like this. I will throw my life away for revenge. But would Elbert want that? Huh, you know, I never thought of it that way. I like Harken's backstory because it fleshed out a group of people that the player likely didn't even think about. Once Elbert succumbs to FE dad disease, I doubt many players went, what about all those knights he left with? Once Harken's in your party, all he has for characterizations are his supports, but I think by episode 40, whatever the fuck this is, you know supports are an absolute goldmine. Though if I did have one complaint, his support list is very bland. It's exactly who you would expect him to support with, the 4 Pharaians, with Vaida being the only real divergence from the expected. We'll start with his Marcus and Lowen supports, since they flesh out his backstory to what he was like before the whole survivor's guilt rampage started. His Marcus support is about Harken feeling glum about the whole I fucked up and couldn't save Elbert thing. Which, come on Harken, it's been like 6 chapters since he died, get your shit together. Marcus tries to calm him down as best he can, but then Harken's worries shift to a different aspect of his past. Who he was before he was a Knight of Foray in the first place. Harken was the knight of some unnamed territory, and his previous lord threw him out to the wolves, and so, as a fallen knight, he wound up in Foray and made a name for himself by being a one-man army and killing an enemy general of, different unnamed territory? Or a general of the same one that threw him out? I really don't know, it's not exactly clear. Harken worries that a bloody reject like him might not be fit to stand next to Eliwood, showing that his guilt and doubts about himself was something he was battling with long before Elbert's death. But Marcus reminds Harken that Eliwood is a good boy, who's too pure to give a shit about any of that, and reminds Harken that Eliwood chooses to trust in him, and in turn, Harken should trust in Eliwood. Marcus's counsel puts Harken at ease, and he gets some of his lost pep back into his step. This support shows Marcus's wisdom, Elbert and Eliwood's kindness, and fleshes out Harken's backstory, and tops it all off with a wholesome, hopeful resolution, making it a solid support all around. Harken's Lowen support is also about his backstory, but in a neat bit of conversation, it's about Harken, but from Lowen's perspective. It starts with Lowen praising Harken, hoping that he can teach him because Lowen considers him to be the best swordsman in all of Foray, though Harken's destroyed self-image causes him to reject Lowen's praise. Lowen then recounts a story to him, about how when he was a kid, his village was very poor, and had nothing of value to defend from the bandits that would pillage it. But in spite of that, Lowen remembers the knights that would come to defend his home and family. In particular, there was one knight who was so great that they inspired Lowen to join the knights himself. And as you might have guessed, that knight was Isadora. It was Harken. Lowen's faith in Harken helps rekindle some of Harken's faith in himself, and he seems to return to his normal self, even training Lowen like he was originally asked. He sees Lowen's potential to be a great knight, and continues to watch over him, though the mostly serious support has a comical ending, when Harken confiscates Lowen's precious snacks, causing Lowen to become overly distraught over a fairly minor event. This support fleshes out Lowen's backstory, and explains why a man whose passion lies in food would take up life as a knight, and for our boy Harken, it helps show the kind of man he can be when he's not weighing himself down with his guilt and remorse. Plus, it's charming to see Harken get back on his feet from the support of the normally aloof Lowen, so it's just a fine support on multiple levels. His support with Eliwood is the one that fleshes out his survivor's guilt even more, as it's hard for Harken not to see Elbert in Eliwood, considering, well, it's his son. Harken attempts to stop Eliwood from fighting on the front lines, and encourages him to take a back seat to the likes of Harken and Marcus. Eliwood refuses, saying that he has his reasons that he must fight, and he can't just leave the fighting to other people and run away. Harken understands Eliwood's feelings, but gets very insistent on Eliwood taking the back seat. But Eliwood stands firm and refuses to cower. He says that he must see this through to the end, and if that end is the end of his own life, then so be it. He just asks that Harken return to Foray to watch over his mother, Queen Eleonora, and make sure she would be okay. However, Harken refuses to make that promise, saying, quote, "I could not protect Lord Elbert. Were I to lose Lord Eliwood as well, what right would I have ever to appear before your lady mother again? Should I lose you, I am prepared to lose myself in turn." Moments like these make me wonder why people think Fire Emblem needs to push for an M rating, because it's a dark enough franchise already. Harken very clearly says that if he fails to protect Eliwood, he will kill himself. And, given Harken's history of being thrown out by and failing his masters, one can see how he's nearing his breaking point. There's only so much suffering a man can take. It's a very heart-wrenching interaction that shows just how deep his depression has cut into him. But even someone as lost as Harken can be redeemed with the right help. Eliwood is no fool. He understands, at least partly, how deep Harken's guilt has wounded him, and he understands why Harken's so concerned for his life. Eliwood spurs Harken on by changing his order. Eliwood now says that his mission is to fight and make it back home to his mother no matter what, and he asks Harken to do the same, to promise him not to go on living if he dies, but to promise him that he will live alongside Eliwood and walk home together as allies. Eliwood's empathy and resolve reinvigorate Harken and motivates him to walk forward, like the other supports, having a bright ending for Harken's wounded psyche. His support with Isadora calls to attention the fact that Harken went on his guilt-induced covert ops for a month without telling a soul back at Foray. Now, most of the cast sees how Harken's been hurting and doesn't really call him out, but Isadora was his fiancée, and he just let himself be assumed dead without making any effort to contact her, and needless to say, she's less than pleased. I like that Isadora calls out Harken for his actions. It's important that we feel sorry for Harken and the pain he's been through, but at the same time, his actions hurt the people he loved and cared about, and that can't just be ignored. Isadora isn't shamed by him for not being happy with his return either. In fact, he agrees that he was wrong, and asks her for her forgiveness, though Isadora doesn't let him off the hook so easily. As the support goes on, Harken tries to convince Isadora that he won't leave her anymore. He intends to stay with her forever now. But Isadora isn't so naive. They're both knights, and she knows that making promises to stay alive forever isn't really something that people in their profession can easily promise each other. Eventually, Harken understands the weight of the pain he's caused her and decides to leave her side, thinking that she doesn't want him around anymore. But Isadora tells him that it's actually the opposite. She remarks that after Harken and Elbert left, all she could think about was his safety. All she could do was wish she went with them, as she felt as though dying was better than living without her beloved. Because I guess birds of a suicidal feather flock together or something. But in spite of everything, Isadora remembered Harken's promise to her, that once he and Elbert got back, Harken would take Isadora as his bride, and she had faith in him that he would one day fulfill that promise. With all of her grief and anger out of her system, she finally accepts Harken's return, and the two embrace as lovers once more, Harken's resolve to live strengthened. The support helps flesh Harken out a bit more by showing the consequences of his actions, and how they aren't entirely justified despite the tragic circumstances around them. However, if I do have one critique, it's that I totally get that they're in love, but I don't really know how they're in love, if that makes any sense. The support is all angst, which, given Harken's character and the circumstances, completely makes sense, but at the same time, I don't really know how this couple acts normally. What's their dynamic? How do they talk with each other? The game doesn't really elaborate any of that because it focuses on them getting back together. And while I think that's definitely the right call, I just feel like the tragedy of the couple is stronger than the couple in and of itself. Isadora and Harken are a case of me being a greedy bastard and wanting more from something that's already good. But hey, it's my right to want everything written exactly to my tastes and no one else's. And lastly, Harken's support with Vaida is kind of a look into both of their characters and motivations, as they have a very similar story. They're both disgraced knights who were cast away from their homes by the Black Fang, and are now serving the Fang in order to accomplish their own goals. What separates them, though, is what they want out of the Fang. Harken just wanted revenge, to kill Nurgle even if it cost him his own life. Vaida, however, was girl boss gaslight gatekeeping her way through the Fang. She wanted to use them to get back to Bern and serve its prince, a young, not yet evil Zephiel. They were both down on their luck, but Harken had given up ever trying to get back to Foray, whereas the spirit of Bern and Vaida never faltered once, and Harken respected her for that. The A support has Vaida start to show some affection for Harken, as his genuine, heartfelt praise for her leaves her embarrassed, and she's a bitch who's not really used to people being nice to her. See also her Heath supports. But the two don't actually end up together. Their epilogue has them put their duty as knights ahead of their growing love for each other. For them to hook up, Harken would have to go to Bern with her, or Vaida would have to go to Foray with him. And neither of those events would ever happen. So, the two part ways, in love, but not willing to make the sacrifice they need to for their love to really blossom. It's a tragic love story that has a tragic ending. There's no happiness this time for Harken, and honestly, I respect it for that. I like FE endings that don't feel the need to force a happy ending. Sometimes life just sucks, and people gotta deal with it. Obviously, I don't want every character to have a miserable ending, but one here and there spices things up enough to make things more interesting in my opinion. All in all, Harken is definitely a character to my tastes. He's serious, has an interesting backstory, ties into the story of the game in a neat way. I just love him. Of course, he's not for everyone. Aside from a little bit of his Lowen support, Harken is a character devoid of humor, and that completely serious nature of his dialogue can turn away people who enjoy a bit more fluff in their characters. But for me, this is the kind of depression-inducing character that I adore, and I will gush about endlessly. I love me my people who do shitty things for understandable reasons. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have to make sure only 3 or less doors in my house are open, so that Harken will come down my chimney and bless me with his cool sword. Normally I give long-winded gags about Patreon, but for this one, I'm just gonna keep it brief. Patreon. Poll. Andrew Crockett. Atomic X160. Benz Again. Fire Emblem Lord. Follow Penta the North Star on Twitch. Gallade Knight. Great Riek. Green Brigand. Hell on Heelys. Jespacito 2. Keith and Coleman. Kieran Morin. Lightning Bolt. Memi. Nevrix the Fallen Shield Guy. Ranger Man Sam. Ryan Walter. Space 1255. Steph D. Tato. Anti-Ginger. Brentendo11. Dell. Drew Hack. Kazu Foxfire. Max. Sezegi. Tellier-Bop. Goodbye. I would like to once again thank you all for making it to the end of another character analysis video. I'm still having fun making these, you're still having fun watching them, so they're still being made. I would like to thank the Green Brigand for his help looking over the script. As always, he's a watchful eye and catches any kinds of mistakes I may or may not ever make. Thanks again. If you enjoyed the video, please feel free to leave a like on the video, comment on the video, subscribe to the channel, ring the bell for notifications, follow the Patreon, join the Discord server, or pray for me because Elden Ring's coming out and I'm not going to be doing jack shit other than that. Until next time.
Change the world. My pride